It's Mo. In the beginning of 2022, we were playing BookTube Spin with Rick McDonnell, and Kieran from Katie Books came up with TBR Tackle. Both games had to do with picking books and then using methods to pick which book you would read for the month or for the 3-month period, and it was a way to tackle your TBR, to get down your physical books, audiobooks, your ebooks, or to read books that you've really been wanting to read but for some reason putting off. So these two games were so fun and we played them all through 2022. Both of these fine booktubers decided not to participate again this year in making these two games, so we have been left in 2023 with a void of super fun booktube games to play. Luckily, Kieran's booktube BFF, Sarah Freshley, and Rick McDonnell's booktube BFF, Jill from the Book Bully, have decided to come together and create a hybrid, fun booktube game for us, for all those who have been wishing and hoping that someone would do just that. I am definitely one of those people, so when I saw that Jill and Sarah were creating the TBR Spin, I got very excited. I did watch the whole video before I created a stack because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to expect, but I have since gone back and made myself a stack. So the rules for the TBR Spin are fairly simple and kind of a combination between the BookTube Spin and TBR Tackle. The participants pick 12 books, one for each month, and each month the host will spin a wheel that has a prompt on the wedges. So wherever that wheel stops, whatever prompt it stops on, that is going to lead us to the book that we're going to read. Now, a fun part of this game is that we don't know, as the participants, what's on the wheel. So we have no idea what's going to come up in this prompt spin. They have already put out videos on both of their channels about the TBR Spin, so I will definitely link both those below. And each month they will spin the wheel, we'll pick our book, we'll read that book, and then we will pick another book at the beginning of the next month, and they will spin the wheel again. I have picked my stack of 12 books, and I wanted to go over it with you today. The first is Women Hollering Creek and Other Stories by Sandra Cisneros. This is a collection of short stories that I found in a little free library. In 2022, I read The House on Mango Street, so I really am excited to try more of Cisneros's writing, and I think a book of short stories is a great way to do that. The next book did show up on my BookTube Spin list, and that is The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. Barbara Kingsolver is best known for the Poisonwood Bible. She's kind of a well-known modern writer that I have never read, so when I saw The Bean Trees in a little free library, I definitely wanted to pick it up. This is much shorter than the Poisonwood Bible, but other than that, I really don't know anything about it. In 2022, I read a short story by Tayari Jones, and her most famous book is An American Marriage. After reading that short story, I knew 100% I wanted to read more of her work, so when I found An American Marriage in a little free library, I picked it up. Another book that I've been wanting to read forever, and one that I've had since 2021, is Severance by Ling Ma. This is a plague novel or a pandemic novel. It's sci-fi. It sounds really amazing, really creepy. I'm pretty intimidated to read this one, so I'm excited to put it on my TBR Spin and be forced to read it. The next book is The Secret of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien, also called Miss Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. I remember watching this animated movie as a child and being super creeped out about it. I'm sure I read this book as a kid, but I don't really remember the book form of it. I really only remember snippets of the aesthetic of the movie. I don't read a lot of middle grade or young adult books, so I thought that this would be a good opportunity opportunity to have to do it. Next, I have The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. This book has been around since the 80s. I think it was one of the first books that really featured Asian Americans and how the Chinese culture and the American culture came together. There was a movie made in the 80s about this book. I think my mom read this book. It's definitely a family drama, which is not my favorite thing, but I would like to get to this one. At this point, I think it's probably considered a modern classic. I've never read any Lauren Groff. I have been wanting to read her work. She's a little bit of a booktube darling. I don't know what Florida is about. Also featured on all of my booktube spin lists is Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders by Lawrence Welcher. This is a nonfiction book about Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders, I guess. It is quite short, and I do love oddities and collections, so I think that I will really enjoy reading about this. One more from my booktube spin list is As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride by Carrie Elwes. The Princess Bride used to be one of my all-time favorite movies. It still is. It's just pushed out of my top 3 at the moment. Wait, is it? Yeah. It's pushed out of my top 3 at the moment. I have read the novel of The Princess Bride, and I would love to hear Carrie Elwes, who I think is quite a compelling actor and funny gentleman, and what his experience making the film was like. Next, we have another short story collection. This is Alice Walker's In Love and Trouble. I read my first Alice Walker in 2022, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would love to read more of her writing, and I think a short story collection is a great way to dive in. The 9th book on my list is Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman. I'm really interested in a bunch of Catherine Steadman's books. Something in the Water is one that I found at a library book sale. I think it has to do with Cli-Fi, which is exciting to me, and so I really want to get to this one. And lastly, we have American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. This is based on a true story, but a fictional novel about a black woman who is an American spy. This seems like a mystery and a crime novel. It seems like there's espionage and adventure. I keep picking this one up, wanting to read it, but I haven't read it yet. Jill and Sarah have already spun the first spin. The prompt that came up was an award-winning book. So our hosts say that any book that has won an award is totally fine. It can be an obscure award, it can be a well-known award. You can recognize the award, you don't have to recognize the award. If you don't have a book that won an award, maybe you could do one that was a finalist for an award or included in an award. But I happen to have 5 books that won awards of some kind on my spin list. I just Googled the name of every book that I had on my list and asked if it had won an award, and I don't remember what the awards that they won were, but Sandra Cisneros' short stories won an award, The Bean Trees, An American Marriage, Severance, and The Secrets of Nim have all won awards. So I could just pick one of these books myself, but I'm going to spin another spinner to find the result. Take the spin one step further and find what book I'm going to read in January. So I have a spin numbered 1 through 5, and we will spin the wheel. And we got number 3, but we didn't number the books. So let's just number the books 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And number 3 is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. Okay, well, this is the book that I will be reading in January. I'm intimidated, I have to tell you. I'm a little bit nervous to read this book. If you want to participate in the TBR Spin, you can pick 12 books, start now in January, or you can pick 11 books and start in February. The hosts are listed down below, so definitely check out their videos for all the rules. It is The middle of January and I have started An American Marriage by TBR Jones. I'm a little less than halfway through. The first, exactly quarter of this book was the first part, and now I'm in the second part. The first quarter of the book tells us the story of Roy and Celestial as they meet, as they get married. It's told from their two perspectives, and it's told from a more present time, reminiscing about the past. Roy is talking a little bit about now and a little bit explaining how they met, and then we kind of see a different perspective but some of the same stories from Celestial. They met, they had a tumultuous relationship, they fell in love, they had a tumultuous relationship, they got married, they had a tumultuous relationship, and then a little over a year after they were first married, Roy is accused of a crime that he did not commit. They have to go through the trial and so many other tragic aspects of this event, and unfortunately Roy is convicted of this crime and sent to prison. So that's the first half of the first quarter of the book. The next kind of part is all epistolary and told in letters back and forth between Roy and Celestial, with a few other letters sprinkled in here and there. And then we get to the second part and another perspective is added. So that's where I am so far in the story. I don't love dual perspectives, so I wasn't sure if I would love that, but I think what really saved it for me is the epistolary part, and I almost wish that the whole rest of the book had been that way, even though that doesn't make sense within the story, so I understand why it's not. I thought what was interesting about the epistolary aspect was that none of the letters were dated, so you as the reader really had to pay attention and try to figure out how much time was passing. Roy is incarcerated longer than he should have been, obviously, but less time than he was supposed to be. So in the second part, we're getting his perspective, Celestial's perspective, and a third perspective talking about how the world is now after Roy has been released, what he's going to do with his life now that he's been released, and how that connects to Celestial and everyone else in their lives. There was definitely some moments in the letter writing section that got me misty-eyed. I never cried and I never shed a tear, but there were some parts that were just really hard. And I think something that TBR Jones does really well is write people who have genuine reactions to things and that you as the reader can identify with. I think the thing that I'm struggling with is that the voices are a little similar. Roy comes from a poor kind of country family in Louisiana, and Celestial comes from a nouveau riche family in Atlanta, and somehow their voices are kind of much of a muchness. They're a little bit too the same. And when we're introduced to other characters, I feel that way as well. I think some characters have very strong voices. A man that Roy meets in prison has a very strong voice, and I think Celestial's dad has a very strong voice. But other than that, they're kind of too much the same, and I wish that even if they had very different accents or a very different manner of speech or something, I think that would help this book along. Now that there's three perspectives, we'll see how I continue to like it. Let me know if you've read An American Marriage. Let me know if you're participating in the TBR Spin, and I'll catch up with you when I read some more. It's January 23rd, and I have finished An American Marriage by TBR Jones. Plan on updating you again before the last part of this book, but I just was flying through it, and it was hard to pause to stop and update you. This book reads so quickly, the chapters are extremely short, and because it's in multiple perspectives, you definitely want to go from person to see what they're thinking, what they're doing, and how that's progressing the story throughout the book. One reason that I really don't like books like that is because usually there's one person that you really want to follow more than the other people or more than the other person, and you're just waiting to get back to that person. So everything else feels a little bit more like filler. I find that especially to be true of thrillers or fantasy books. I definitely personally don't love the multiple perspective in those genres. I do begrudgingly say that I think it worked well here. It was nice to see everyone's perspective and to get their real motivations for things. Because An American Marriage is very much a book about people's emotions, love, loss, and how your relationship as a couple bleeds into everyone else that you know to a certain extent. I think having the reader understand intimately the three main characters in this book was a good choice, and there were some characters where you weren't 100% sure of their motivations, so it was interesting to know so well our three main characters and then have to figure out what their parents and their other significant others and their family were thinking and doing, how the three main relationships impacted those other relationships and then rippled out and impacted other relationships and other relationships. I really enjoyed that about this book, and I think that that's something that is a good juxtaposition, because when you're reading from Roy and Celestial, our married couple who is separated by jail, feels so isolated. And another thing that I really liked about this book was that it felt very real. It felt like real reactions to what people would say or do, and how we all want to do one thing for our relationship but secretly are kind of hoping for another, or are hoping to get our way in the relationship even when we are telling our significant other that's not what we want. So I think that was interesting. I don't think every relationship is like that all the time, obviously, but this reminded me very much of a young relationship, a relationship you have when you're younger. So that's what it felt like to me. Like you are telling a person, oh yes, I want to get married, I want to do these things, because that's what you think you're supposed to do as a young person, and that's what you think the other person wants to hear. But deep in your heart, you might know that that's not true. Or maybe you're someone who says, no, it's okay if we don't have kids, but then deep in your heart, you know that you do actually want kids. And I think that's a reason that a lot of young couples break up. And you break up with many people when you're young, because you have to learn how to be truthful with yourself and be truthful with your partner. And I think that a lot of people don't know how to do that when they're youngins, and that's what early relationships are for. And so it's interesting in this book that Celestial and Roy got together fairly young, not super, super young, but fairly young, and made these decisions, and then their life was forever changed when Roy was sent to prison. So it makes you think about those relationships in a different way, and the isolation that you have, or the other people that you're talking to, wherever you happen to be isolated from away from your spouse, you're going to come to different conclusions, and maybe you're going to learn to be more truthful, or maybe you're not, but you're not going to learn it together. I think that was like part of the point of this book, was that idea of growing up and learning who you are. The expectations put on you as a young couple might not be right for you, and might not be what ultimately happens. I don't like how much the back of this gives away, so I would recommend not reading the synopsis, or not reading very far into the synopsis, because I personally would have liked to have known less about what happened going into it and had to see it for myself. I do think there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had and questions, and I think a lot of it has to do with love and family relationships, marriage, commitment, communion, as Celestial would say, and of course about wrongful incarceration and how Black people are treated by the police and by our society and by our government, obviously. I liked that although this could have gotten extremely graphic and gruesome and gory in its depiction of the extreme duress under which these people were going through. Roy is in prison, so lots and lots of bad things happen to everyone who goes to prison, and they did touch on some of those things that changed him and that he could or could not prevent, but it was never explicitly stated gruesome, disgusting depictions of violence against him or in any other situation. There was plenty of violence that happened. Tayari Jones left it to you to imagine that and to know and to understand what was happening. I think it could have gone that way and would have been a much more volatile and disturbing book, but I'm glad that it didn't. I think the overall story and the love story between these two people, which is at the heart of this book, will stay with me longer if I'm not constantly trying to like bat away the like extremely disturbing violent scenes that could have been. I will still think about the violence that happened in this book, and it will still disturb me without like scarring me for life, you know? And I might be in the minority on that because apparently like most people don't care about violence that much, and most people are fine with continually being bombarded with it and desensitized to it, but I just cannot get behind that. It just really, really disturbs me, keeps me up at night, literally gives me nightmares. So I appreciate a book that is strong, powerful, and emotional without being overly graphic or explicit. An interesting thing about this book is that it does in some ways read like the contemporary romances that I've read. The multiple narration is very common. Third act breakup slash makeup is very common. And this read that way in many respects, although obviously it was not a romance book. There was romance in it, but that wasn't the focus of it. So I wonder if Jones did that specifically to make it more accessible to people. I think that this is an extremely accessible story that many people who wouldn't read about a black man being wrongfully incarcerated would read. And then they would see the wrongness of that act. And they would have to look at that this happens in America. This happens in our world. So I wonder if maybe making it that way, making it more accessible for someone who wouldn't necessarily pick up a book like that, was a choice. So that was the first book that I read for TBR Spin. I'm super excited to spin the wheel in February, but we have quite a few days to wait. So I'll catch up with you when I see Jill or Sarah's video. It is February 1st, and I have queued up Sarah from Freshly Read Books' next video for the TBR Spin. So I think that the Book Bully and Freshly Read Books are going to be alternating who does what the prompt on their channels. So they both did the first one together, and now it's Sarah, and then next it will be Jill. So let's watch the prompt and see what book we get. I have my stack here. It did say that there are prompts to swap out books, but that mostly your stack will be staying the same, which is different from both TBR Tackle and BookTube Spin. The BookTube Spin you could change at will, but TBR Tackle, basically you changed your stack almost every month just by circumstance. She also said that once a prompt is chosen on the wheel, it is removed and then a new prompt is put on, so there won't be any repeats. And she also said that there is a Storygraph challenge, which I've been looking for and I was hoping would be on here, but I hadn't seen yet, so that's awesome. Interesting. A book with the lowest Storygraph or Goodreads rating. I didn't re-show you my stack because you saw it earlier in this video, so this is going to take me a little while, although if I had to guess what had the lowest rating, let's guess now and then I'll go look. I would say it would be Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonders, As You Wish, or Woman Hollering Creek, which is a collection of short stories. So those are my three guesses that are going to be the lowest rated on Goodreads. I have got to check Goodreads and I'll get back to you. I am shocked. I did not expect these ratings. I thought for sure that the Joy Luck Club would have the highest rating, but this only had a 3.95 rating. The lowest rated book, the book that I will be reading for TBR Spin month 2, February, could not have gone better. That is American Spy by Lauren Wilkinson. This is perfect because I am trying to read a lot of Black authors and Black stories in February. American Spy had an average rating of 3.51, pretty low. I was also surprised that Severance only had a 3.92 rating, and I was also surprised that Florida by Lauren Groff had a pretty low rating of 3.78. So I will be reading American Spy in February, and I will vlog that experience, and at the end of February's video we will pick our March spin. So let me know if you're going to be participating in the TBR Spin. Let me know if you did TBR Tackle or the BookTube Spin and what you thought of them, and let me know if you've ever read American Spy before. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!